Hello, everyone. This is Antonio Carrion at SWK Technologies. We're waiting for a few other people to sign in. So while we're doing that, let's go over some housekeeping. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar using the questions field in the toolbar of your GoToWebinar. We will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. We're recording this presentation and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees as well as those who registered but were not able to attend. We're constantly sharing important updates on technology and software, tools, best practices, tips and tricks on our social media channels. So we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we have hundreds of instructional videos. Please take a moment at the end of the presentation to answer our poll or request additional information. With that said, good day, everyone. This is Antonio Carrion. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at SWK Technologies. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Cybersecure Your Remote Workforce. First of all of us at SWK hope you, your families, your friends, and coworkers are well during the COVID-19 pandemic. At SWK, we had decided early on to let everyone work from home. So we are all well, and we're operating at 100% capacity. Today's webinar is part of our Remote Work Taskforce series that includes 2 other webinars, Managing Your Workforce Remotely, HR Policies and Technologies, and 5 must-have software solutions for a work-from-home environment. All the webinars will be recorded and made available to you. We also have our Business Survival Guide, which is a 64-page ebook with a ton of tips and best practices for working from home, securing your applications and data, and other solutions that can help you during good times and bad. You can find all of these and many more resources on our website, swktech.com. Our hope for this series is that you make the wisest possible decisions relating to technologies and software automation solutions during the current crisis and what is now being called the new normal. We're seeing a few approaches across our customers and prospects, and I'd like to share those with you. We have some customers that are super busy, and they are using this time to identify gaps in their systems and to gain insights into their operational weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Some are optimizing on the fly, which is a courageous thing to do. Others are waiting for the demand to slow down before they update or upgrade their current technology stack or totally migrate to a new system. We have other customers whose businesses have slowed down significantly. For them, it's a good time to internalize and analyze their operations. During this downtime, some customers are investing to prepare for the economic rebound. If you have an optimistic view, this is a good time to upgrade. If you have an optimistic view and strongly believe there are solutions that will help provide you with benefits in the near future, but you're concerned with cash flow, we understand that. But talk to us. We can help you set your software and technology priorities and work with you to defer payments for solutions you may be interested in or facilitate low interest rate loans on your upgrades. Our role is to help you endure the crisis today and to position you for success when the crisis is over. At the very least, we hope we can provide you with some educational materials that provide food for thought and that may help you make wise decisions moving forward. Next slide, please. I will be joined by Bill Michael. He's our VP of Operations in our Network Services practice. Bill is a subject matter expert in risk management, business continuity, and IT operations. Also joining us, Richard Schatzberg, founder of the National Cloud Technologies Association and a cybersecurity advisor to SWK. Next slide, please. I'd like to quickly show you our corporate organization chart. As you can see, SWK is a fully owned subsidiary of Silversun Technologies, Inc., which is publicly traded on the NASDAQ market under the ticker SSNT. Silversun has other entities, including Secure Cloud Services, Inc., which focuses on application hosting, and Critical Cyber Defense Corp., which provides high-end cybersecurity services by way of a fully staffed security operations center, or smart SOC, as we like to call it. Next slide, please. Here's a quick view of SWK. We are a national company and have over 200 employees coast to coast across the US. So we're used to a remote working environment. We provide cybersecurity and secure cloud hosting services for the SMB community. And we have the resources of the smart SOC at our disposal. So we incorporate enterprise class cybersecurity into our SMB offerings. We also provide ERP, accounting software, and software automation solutions, and we are highly recognized in each one of our practices. Next slide, please. Every few years, we encounter a new crisis. Remember Y2K? In retrospect, it's easy to disqualify as a non-event, but if you recall, there was a lot of hype and anxiety leading up to it. What's important about Y2K is that the 90s were the time when online businesses really took off, and the concerns over the so-called millennium bug brought business continuity and disaster recovery concepts to the forefront of technology strategies, concepts that we're applying today. Soon after that, we saw the dot-com bubble burst from those way overvalued internet companies from the 90s. You remember the ones with all those Super Bowl commercials that they could barely afford. Then, of course, we had the terrorist attacks on 9/11, which was a regional event, but it was painfully felt across the US and showed us how vulnerable we can be. During Hurricane Katrina in 2005, almost 2,000 people died. We had the financial crisis in 2007 stemming from the subprime lending practices and collapse of large financial services companies. In 2012, we had Hurricane Sandy, which knocked out our power in the Northeast for weeks. These are only a few, of course, and they are memorable examples, but clearly we've had wildfires on the West Coast, tornadoes in the Midwest, and other catastrophes. Each of these crises has a different dimension, a different source, but they all impacted our economy regionally or nationally, and each crisis had lessons for businesses and individuals. Now we're facing the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic. This feels different than the other crises, maybe because it's invisible, because it's contagious, because it has isolated us. It's led to a vast migration of people working from home. So our technologies, our daily routines, and our stamina are being tested. Some of the ramifications are, we're now facing uncertain times. Businesses that require physical locations and on-site personnel are the ones that are most affected, and they're seeking new ways to do businesses. There's no clear vision of the economic path, making it difficult to anticipate and prepare for the future. What we do know is that working remotely has become a necessity for many organizations. What's different then about coronavirus is that it's a global pandemic with a global health and economic implications. To worsen the matter, we're battling an onslaught of hackers who know most work from home devices are not secured. And these hackers have significantly ramped up their attacks and are taking advantage of this crisis. We are facing a new business paradigm. And to begin the conversation on today's new paradigm, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Michael. Bill?
Thank you, Antonio. Good afternoon. In a moment, I'll talk about the new normal, but I want to apologize in advance for any potential dog barking, lawnmowers, or leaf blower noise. Environmental change is just, as much a component of today's new work setting as are the operational and security aspects of a business that we'll be discussing in this presentation. So COVID-19 has created the new normal, and you'll be hearing that term throughout this presentation. As we've seen a massive shift of business operations toward a remote workforce on a scale and a speed that's never been seen in human history. As Antonio mentioned, some companies like SWK already had a remote workforce culture, which lessened the disruption value and eased the transition of the the staff to the new work conditions. But what about those companies operating in a traditional office setting? We'll talk about that. Business continuity planning has traditionally, especially in the SMB space, been seen as an insurance policy and expense, and quite frankly, a discretionary item that CFOs and CEOs chose to move forward with or not move forward with. This has resulted in many companies being unprepared, and as a result, left to react in real time to figure out how to keep their employees safe while staying in business. In doing so, businesses may be unknowingly assuming operational and security risks, with decisions that are being made on the fly to keep the lights on. So let's take a look at some of these decision points and other considerations to ensure, how businesses can continue to operate while securing their data and business assets. Next slide. So when looking to deploy a remote workforce, it's important to assess your security posture, meaning, are you positioned to support your users in a secure manner as you would in the office? How are these resources consumed, your data and your applications? Well, they occur in different ways. So let's explore, cost aside, some of the pros and cons for the new normal. So on-premise computing, basically you have your equipment, your servers, and equipment in the office. So there is a sense of control, right? I can see, I can feel, I can touch the equipment. I know where it is. I feel good. But on the flip side of that, it's typically in a dirty closet or a room where you don't have all the environmental controls, power, HVAC, cooling, and security. You're also connected to the internet. Almost the entire world is today. So what type of security have you employed for that on-premise equipment? Do you have the advanced firewalls and network management, security management to keep hackers and bad actors out of your environment? And today with COVID-19, a lot of offices are closed. So how are you addressing the physical security of those assets if you don't have employees on site in the office like you normally would? What about support? And if a machine goes down and needs to be, physical intervention, well, how's that happening today if you have people working remote? Then you have cloud computing. So your business applications, electronic assets are hosted by a third-party firm. It's internet accessible. So I have an internet connection, I have a computer, I have a device, I can access my business applications. These environments are robust with heavy security. So they have the redundancy, the generators, they have the fault tolerance that you probably are lacking with an on-premise solution. You have the resiliency. So if there's a loss of building or infrastructure, they're replicating and your services can be brought online rather quickly at an alternate location. But with those benefits comes the perceived loss of control, right? You've outsourced your business, your assets to a third party. They're no longer, quote unquote, in your control, and that's bothersome to some businesses. And then you have the hybrid model, which is, I think, today where a lot of companies fall, where you have a mix of services, right? So, companies may elect to keep their file server and printing on premise due to speed and, ease of use, but elect to outsource their line of business applications, the heart of running their business that they cannot live without. They move that to the cloud. So examples, Office 365, QuickBooks, and other applications have moved to the cloud to provide that high availability, resiliency with all the security controls around it. So when enabling a remote workforce, which of these delivery models affords a business the most protection from an operations or security standpoint? My colleague Richard Schatzberg will be speaking to that later in the presentation. So when accessing your computer assets remotely, there's different methods that you can access that vary from ease of implementation, cost, and security. So one method of accessing your assets is LogMeIn or some equivalent application. So this is a situation where you install an agent on your work PC or device, and the remote user securely accesses the PC via the internet. So they're home, they're at another site, they log in, enter their credentials, and they have access to that machine. And once they're logged in, they operate exactly like they were in the office, except they're remote. So all you need is an agent, you need a PC in the office, and you're working remote. So that's the easiest and least expensive option for enabling a remote user. Another option is VPN, where a remote user authenticates via a firewall or appliance that resides in your office or could be in the cloud. And once on the corporate network, they have access to files and applications and other resources. So there's an increased cost to implement this and support it. Then lastly, you have RDS or remote desktop services. So there's a server, could be on-premise or in the cloud, where you host virtual desktops. So basically, you're turning your PC or device into a dumb workstation. All of the applications and processing power and storage reside on this remote machine or terminal services farm. This gives a company the ability to completely control the what and how the services are delivered. You can apply group policies for centralized management, security, and access. However, this solution is the most expensive to implement and maintain. So when looking at authentication, there's a couple ways your remote users can authenticate into your environment, on-prem or to the cloud. One way is single-factor authentication. So here a user will enter their username and password, and that will be the credentials. Type it in appropriately, you get access to the resources you're looking for. However, this is the least secure method of authentication. We strongly recommend multi-factor authentication. So here you would enter your username and password, but also provide another form of authentication or token. Multi-factor authentication varies in levels of sophistication. The most common method that you'll see is your question and answer that you'll find on a lot of websites. So, I provide the answer to, what was my high school name or my first dog. And that represents a piece of information that in theory only you know. So the combination of your username, password, and this special piece of information provides a level of authentication to prove who you are. There are other solutions out there, randomly generated tokens that can be sent to your phone, either via text or voice, or even to your email. So, when you're looking to move your remote, your users to a remote situation, multi-factor authentication is the recommended way to protect your assets. Let's talk about, bring your own device versus company issued devices. This really comes down to cost, control, and security. So bring your own device, it's your, employees, device. You don't have to pay for it, they have it, and they just go and use it. However, it's a personal device. So, they're probably using it for a multitude of purposes. Their kids can be on it, their spouse. You have no control over how it's used, what it's being used for, and how it's secured. Company-issued device is expensive, but it allows you to set up those devices in the same manner as you would in the office. So I can authenticate it to my domain. I can put all the controls in place and software to lock it down and secure it. So, bring your own device, company issued. Again, it's a cost, control, security decision. So with that said, how do you protect these remote devices? So, people are working from home, and, home networks are not the most secure. They're insecure in many different ways. So how are you protecting your corporate assets? The hackers, as Antonio alluded to earlier, know that the home network is the least secure, and they're targeting it. They were targeting it before COVID-19. They're targeting it more now because it's the easiest entry into, getting to the information that they want the most. So what can you do? You have antivirus, you have patching, make sure that the latest Microsoft patch is installed, or Apple. You could encrypt your disk to ensure that the data at rest, especially Social Security, credit card, non-public information, is protected. But you really only can do that for a company-issued device, because you're going to get a lot of pushback on the home user's personal machine. And then really, how are you protecting against the cyber threats that are out there? How are you protecting against ransomware and other pointed attacks that these bad actors are initiating? Your antivirus, your patching aren't going to protect that, detect it, and your home network is not as robust and secure as your business environment. So these are the things you need to be looking at. And then let's talk about monitoring your remote user. So it goes beyond just productivity. When folks say, hey, I have Sally and John work from home, but how do I know they're doing their job? How do I know that they're putting in the hours and doing what they would be doing in the office? Now, not to say that that's not important. It is. You have a business to run, and there's things that they need to do to contribute to whatever it is your business is delivering. But beyond that, how are you policing, what they're doing with the information that they have in hand? Especially when you're looking at a bring your own device, they're downloading a spreadsheet that could have non-public information out there. How do you know they're not downloading that, attaching it in their personal, email account and sending it off to folks? That's a real concern. And there's studies that have been published. I'm sure most are aware that your number one security threat, to any business is internal. It's your internal resources that poses the most risk to your business. And then lastly, what policies do you have in place for home use? Some companies may or may not have an acceptable use policy for the office, which dictates and prescribes, how they're supposed to use the company assets, the do's and the don'ts. But are there exceptions or additional items that need to be considered in that work from home environment? These are the things that, if you don't prescribe and are prescriptive, you're just opening yourself up for higher risk. So now I'll hand things over to my colleague, Rich Schatzberg.
Thank you so much, Bill. That was really thoroughly and well done. And I also want to thank Antonio for that wonderful walk down memory lane, having lived through all of those events over the last 20 years. Now I understand why I have no hair left. So thank you for that. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about, I guess, the background when we go out, when I go out and I speak to businesses or I talk on cybersecurity. There's a lot of commonality out there, and a lot of a lack of understanding about the environment that we're living in. One of the questions when we meet with senior executives of the company that we always ask is, well, how do you feel you stand from a security posture? And oftentimes, almost all the time, the answer comes back and says, well, yeah, we feel really good. And of course, the next question we ask is, well, how do you know? And the typical answer that comes back is, well, I asked my network team or my network head or my CTO or whatever it is. And so what you really have is a business owner, a small business owner in many cases, who is taking the word for their internal team, their network person. Sometimes it's somebody that just comes in when there's a problem with a computer, who's telling them they're well prepared for it. But I don't get the sense, almost all the time, I don't get the sense that business owners, business executives really have a true understanding of the risks that are out there. And to take this to the full extent, SWK is one of the top ranked managed services providers or network services companies in the world. And for them, as well as for every other high-end managed services or network services company, the truth is that a sophisticated patient hacker can break through the many layers of cybersecurity, not because those layers are not there, but because in many cases they're relying on human error. Your weakest link is often your employees, okay? And that has gotten more complicated as we've moved these employees to the home network, where we don't have much control over those networks in many cases. And it's just very challenging. I happen to have been at a speech on the Intrepid in New York City a couple of months ago, and the just retired head of cybersecurity for the Department of Defense was standing in front of a room of 300-400 people and asked everybody on the boat, or on the ship, I guess, too big to call a boat, on the ship, if a hacker is patient and sophisticated, what is the likelihood of them getting through? And there was a pause, and then right behind him on the screen, behind him on a huge, massive screen, popped up 100% likelihood. And the point is that if a hacker wants you and is patient and slow and methodical about it, there is almost a 100% likelihood that they are going to get through. And you could have the best firewall infrastructure, you could have the best antivirus, the best anti-malware, and other layered security solutions. But again, because human error is involved here, those solutions can often be circumvented. And as Bill correctly said, the hackers are very sophisticated. 2016 was the first year where more than 50% of the hacks came from within our national borders. So people think it's the Russians, it's the Middle East, it's the Chinese. Well, okay, yes, some of that activity is true, but actually hackers in this country have gotten very sophisticated. And I've received phishing attempts recently that are, about COVID-19, that, hey, we believe you've been in touch with somebody that may have come down with this virus. Please click here to gain more information. Well, the second you click on that link, guess what? The hacker's now in. I received one the other day about the federal CARES package, the payroll protection program that I have a feeling many of the companies on this call have applied for. And it was just a simple email with a logo of a bank, a very professionally done logo, saying if you'd like to check the status of your payroll protection program application, click here. The second you touch that link, the hacker is now in. So there's the level of sophistication will circumvent in many cases if your employees are not being very careful what they're clicking on and looking really closely at those emails, can circumvent even the best network protection layers. And I think the other thing that people don't understand is they don't really understand the difference between network security layers and true cybersecurity analysts. People think they're similar. The truth is, to use some medical analogies, it's like a doctor versus a dentist. They're two different professions. They may have both gone to a form of medical school, but I don't think you would want your dentist providing heart surgery. And in fact, the head of our Security Operations Center once used a great analogy with me. He said, your network team is like your doctor. They're there to help keep you healthy, to help, to use the analogy, to keep your network productive and working effectively. Your cybersecurity team, they're like your bodyguards. They're there to protect you at the moment of attack. And to use that same analogy, that you wouldn't want your dentist doing a cardiovascular surgery on you. If you get jumped in a back alley, you're probably going to want to call your protective services, as opposed to calling your doctor to protect you. Unless your doctor happens to be a black belt, you're probably going to want somebody there, the cybersecurity analyst, to protect you from that attack. So these two professions are really very, very different. Yet I don't think people understand that they are in fact different. And network security and network engineers, when a hacker is able to break through human error or otherwise, most network engineers in this world are not trained to identify the digital footprint of a hacker, let alone know how to remediate that hacker. Okay, that is the job of a security operations center and the security analysts that exist within that security operations center. So for many of our clients, we're proposing that above and beyond the network security layers, that they in fact implement a SOC, a security operations center, to have those security analysts there to protect them should a hacker break through. Now, those security operation analysts can both protect the core network, as well as through agent-based solutions, can protect the machines at home as well, whether they be company-owned machines or personal machines. In the case of personal machines, the employees would have to provide approval. Probably the strongest and most effective tool that we as network engineers and cybersecurity analysts have to protect you from cyber theft. The other side of this is that people don't really know, and I'm not an expert in this either, is the insurance side of it. And cyber insurance is extremely complicated. It's one of the things we talk to business owners about. Do you understand your cybersecurity policy? Do you have an independent cybersecurity policy, or is it a rider of your general liability policy? Those are two very distinct things. Even if you have a separate cyber insurance policy, do you understand the exclusions in there? Because they can be very complicated, and unless you're an expert at reading insurance policies, really understanding those exclusions can be really complicated. So reaching out to your insurance broker and asking questions about different scenarios and having them talk to you. One of them that I asked some of our leading insurance folks that we have connections to is, hey, does cybersecurity coverage, if we have an independent cybersecurity policy, will that cover remote workers? And the general answer is yes. Whether the employee is working on premise, in an office, or at home, generally the cybersecurity policy will. But the one factor that was brought up to me by one of the leading experts in cyber insurance was some of it will depend upon how you protect that home machine. And the word that they kept using with me was encryption. Are you ensuring that your communications are encrypted? Are they connecting securely from the home environment, whether it be a company-owned machine or a personal machine, into the network securely? Because that encryption is one of the critical factors in determining how much coverage you will get in case of a breach, or in case that you need to notify customers that their non-public personal information, their MPI, has been hacked and stolen. And just the last point here is to reiterate that, you know, hackers are taking advantage of this. As Bill said, as Antonio said, there's no question that the hacking community has gotten much more active as people have migrated to their homes. And as I said, I've received several examples of phishing attacks and other forms of attacks that have specifically targeted the emotional strings of people in this environment. And one of the things that I think, to Antonio's point that there's this, and Bill's point that there's this new, one of the things that makes this event in that 20-year history so different is the way we are now communicating with our colleagues and socializing. I have been invited and taken part in Zoom meetings, Zoom cocktail hours that are both amongst professional colleagues and amongst family members. Some people may have had Zoom Easters this past Sunday. Zoom, during this coronavirus, has struggled with security. The question becomes, and they've done a pretty good job. They put out several security patches since they first recognized, but they've really taken a little bit of a brand beating. My question is, are people on their home machines, whether it's corporate owned or personal owned, taking advantage of those updates? Do they know to install them? Because if they're not, and then they're using Zoom for a cocktail hour, are they in fact then opening the door to a hacker? So it's just something to think about, and something to be able to pass down to your employees about how best do we secure in this kind of an environment. Can we move to the next slide real quickly? Yeah, this is wonderful. This is one of the examples, and thank you guys for inserting this in, but this is just one example of you know, an email. And I'll age myself. I got to put my reading glasses on to read this, but you know, you recently came into contact with a colleague, friend, family member who has COVID-19 at Tabor AB. Please print attached form that has your information pre-filled and proceed to the nearest emergency clinic. Anything that you click on this email, you click that emergency contact, you click anything else in these emails, sometimes you'll even get a phishing exercise that says you can't download the image. If you want to see the image, click here. Even that link is a method in for the hackers. So these kind of emails, and this is such a wonderful and simple example of how the hackers are taking advantage, that if you're not educating your employees on the severity of these things, and on how, if they don't know who an email is from, if they don't read the inbound address very carefully, an I can actually be an L. That's how sophisticated these hackers are getting. That they shouldn't be clicking on something from anyone that they don't know about. Or if they have any hint of an idea that the email may not be real, stop, do nothing, call the person who sent it to you and say, did you send me this? So let's continue on, but that was a great example, guys. Thanks for putting that in. Next slide. Here's another one. So this is just another example of the volume of threats that was put in, and I apologize, guys. You know, it's a little bit hard to read, but you can see the epicenters in many cases of where some of these campaigns are coming from. You know, and it obviously talks about the number of cases, but also the direction of these coronavirus virus themed attacks. So, you know, again, this is a global problem, and we're seeing it more and more. Thank you. Can we continue to the next slide? Okay, so a couple of options that I wanted to talk a little bit more. Software solutions and tools, you know, obviously Bill did a great job of talking about, you know, agents being loaded on your work from home computers. Those can be both network agents as well as cybersecurity agents. So for example, in SWK, they use a network agent that allows the help desk people to remotely connect in and help solve help desk issues remotely. Well, the Security Operations Center as well can place an agent on that machine so that even though the computer is not working from the core business network, we can actually be monitoring that machine from a cyber standpoint on a 24/7 basis as well. Really, really impactful. And Bill did a great job of talking about multi-factor authentication. For those of you that use banking applications, usually they're a little bit more stringent. I happen to have logged into my checking account today via my phone application, and the first form of authentication is my fingerprint. I have to put a fingerprint in there to identify me, and then it says, would you like a phone call or would you like a text message with a code? And I click text message. The next thing I get on my phone is a text which I can then input into the system for the second or multi-factor authentication. I can't stress enough how this very simple, inexpensive solution is the best layer of security. So let's just take, for example, somehow I get a text on my phone giving me a code for breaking into one of my things, but I haven't tried to log into that system. Okay, let's say I plug in a password to a system, or for a system that I normally would have had to have plugged in a password as opposed to my fingerprint, but I haven't done it. And all of a sudden I get a text with a code. What does that mean to me? That means, guess what? Somebody else has my password. And now I'm receiving that notification as a warning to me. What do I immediately have to do? Go in and change my password. Incredibly powerful. Multi-factor authentication is an inexpensive, cheap solution. So I would certainly, if those of you are not using it, certainly contact your network services team and talk to them. And then cybersecurity training employees. At SWK, they have a product called Phishing Defender, where they're actually using a managed phishing education system from a company called KnowBe4, where they actually push emails, non-harmful phishing attacks into your corporate environment to see how many of your employees will fall for it. And then they provide training to help move your employees along the awareness curve to help them be more cognizant of what a phishing attack feels like. What are the 4 or 5 or 6 things in an email that I should be looking out for? The security operations, Antonio talked about that we have a partnership with an Israeli firm that has a fully staffed 24/7 security operations center. That group in Israel was written up in Forbes as the global emerging leader for cybersecurity and security operations centers. And I will tell you right now, they have kept several of our clients in business. They've stopped multifaceted international attacks with customers of ours that live in compliance-based industries that had the hackers successfully been able to break in and pull data. These clients would have had to have provided large numbers of notifications out to their customers telling them that their personal information has been stolen. So this level of security, the Security Operations Center, is about as powerful of a cybersecurity solution as you can put in place. And if in fact your company lives within a compliance-based industry, this is absolutely something you should be talking to SWK about, or your internal or outsourced network services team to be able to put this type of application in place. And I did just want to point out that within the SWK Secure Cloud hosting infrastructure, not only is it an extremely robust infrastructure that is managed by our SWK's network services team, but that entire infrastructure is protected by our Israeli Security Operations Center. So you're getting kind of the best of both worlds. You're getting a top 50 network services company managing that infrastructure, and as well, you're getting a Forbes recognized global emerging leader Security Operations Center. So if this is something you're interested, it's a great reason to reach out to your client folk, your relationship managers at SWK, and talk to them about this. So I think we can move on to the next slide, and I will turn it back over to Bill.
Thank you, Richard. So before we go into Q&A, I want to raise our call to action. So these are unique, uncharted times we're living in. Decisions are being made quickly. as businesses react to the social and economic impacts of COVID-19. Maintaining business operations in a secure manner is paramount for continuity during and after the pandemic. To help navigate, validate, and sanity check how your business is prepared in situations and drivers that are unique to your business, SWK would like to extend a complimentary consultation and assessment. We'll review during that call your work environment. What's your business? How does it operate? What are some of the unique things and challenges that you're facing? We'll take a look and talk through your remote work strategy. What have you implemented? How's it working? What issues or challenges have you experienced? We'll talk about business continuity. So by going remote, you've in part enacted part of your plan, if you had a plan, to continue your business operation. But beyond that, do you have a formal plan that extends through all of the situations and risk vectors that will not only get you through COVID-19, but any other crisis that may occur in the course of the day-to-day. We'll look at, and outline strengths and weaknesses based upon what we've discussed, and make some recommendations for your consideration. So, we really encourage you to take advantage of this. Again, it's no cost, and talking this through, again, we're all reacting and, working through this, but it's always good, I find, to just be able to throw things, run things by folks, bounce things off walls, and just get a different perspective. And even in that conversation, things may arise that you never thought of, but is very valuable to you and your business. So if you're interested, please respond via chat or send an email after the session, and someone from the SWK team will follow up and help get this meeting scheduled. So I want to hand this back over to Antonio.
Bill and Richard, thank you so much. That's a lot of valuable information for IT leaders and managers and other business personnel. And we want to give our audience the opportunity to ask questions. So if you haven't already, please submit your questions in the questions field of your GoToWebinar toolbar. While you're typing your questions, we're going to launch a quick poll. Please take a minute to answer it. It's only one question. And we do have a question already, and I think maybe, Bill, this might be a good question for you to take on. How do we routinely and securely back up a laptop that operates mostly in a work-from-home environment? The example would be where there are no servers, but we operate in the cloud.
Great question. So there are cloud backup solutions in the market. SWK has solutions that we offer our customers where you place an agent on your machine and you're able to specify what data wants to get backed up. You could back up the whole machine if you're worried about recovering the machine in its entirety. If you have a hardware failure and you want to buy a new machine and re-image it based off of that backup, to just data protection. These services are inexpensive, but provide a real value. Our solution includes encryption in the cloud, encryption in transit, as well as version control, so we can manage the full life cycle of your data assets. But again, it's a matter of putting an agent and then replicating that data up to a cloud service.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I don't see any more questions, but if anyone does have any further questions or wants to reach out to us, you can email us at info@swktech.com. Again, thank you, Bill and Richard, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, or if you need immediate help, email us at info@swktech.com, tech.com, or contact your customer account manager or sales representative directly, or your consultant if you happen to be working with someone. You can also go to our website, swktech.com, and download our free business survival guide. It has information on this and other work from home topics that are very valuable. Otherwise, we wish you good health, and we're here to help your business endure this crisis and position you for success moving into the future when all of this subsides. So we'll talk to you soon, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.